Ryan, among President Trump's first words, deeply disappointing. Talk to us about his reaction in the room and what you asked him about.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to look at this, Ingley. First, how emphatic he was hammering the Supreme Court in a very direct and sometimes personal way, going after a group of Supreme Court justices that he appointed, saying at one point that their families should be ashamed over this decision. He stopped short of saying that he regretted appointing them to the Supreme Court. But I do think that we need to put that into context. It is not common for a president of the United States to be so personally critical of a Supreme Court justice or a group of Supreme Court justices after a ruling. And that was at least part of the message that the president was trying to make here today in the briefing room. But then to your second point about the other avenues he has to employ tariffs. Obviously, there are these other provisions within the law that Laura outlined that they're going to try to attack. That seems to be his first and probably most reliable path.
Welcome to Dr. John Exclusive Podcast. So what just happened? Stop everything you are doing right now. If you thought yesterday was chaos, you have not seen anything yet. Because today is not just another bad day for Donald Trump. Today is the day his entire house of cards finally collapsed. We are not talking about more late-night social media rants. We are not talking about cabinet members whispering behind closed doors. We are talking about the Supreme Court of the United States, the highest judicial authority in the country.
How do you handle criticism of your court or your opinions today?
Well, it does come with the territory. Often, when any of us issue an opinion, there's often a dissent. Usually not, but I mean, most opinions, or more opinions than anything else, are unanimous. And that's you get used to the criticism right away. And it can very much be healthy. We don't believe that we're, flawless in any way. And it's important that our decisions are subjected to scrutiny, and they are. The problem sometimes is that the criticism can move from a focus on legal analysis to personalities. And you see from all over, I mean, not just any one political perspective on it.
Slamming the door on Trump's last remaining legal escape route and essentially handing him over to the Senate for conviction. 5-4, that was the vote, and the message could not have been clearer. No presidential immunity, no emergency relief, no magic legal trick. The trial is happening, period. This is the moment that changes absolutely everything, because up until this ruling, Trump still had hope. He still had legal maneuvers left to try. He still had appeals to file. He still had judges who might side with him. But after this Supreme Court decision, there is nowhere left to go. There is no higher court. There is no emergency escape hatch. There is no constitutional loophole that his lawyers can suddenly discover. What there is instead is a Senate trial barreling toward him like a freight train, and conviction odds that just jumped from 72% to 78% in a matter of hours. 78%. That is not a maybe. That is not a possibility. That is a probability. That is the kind of number that tells you conviction is not just likely, it is expected, and Trump knows it. Oh, does he know it? Within hours of that Supreme Court ruling, he posted more than 75 times on Truth Social. But this was not his usual calculated rage. This was not strategic outrage designed to fire up his base. This was pure, unadulterated panic. This was a man who just realized the game is actually over and there is no way to win. Rip SCOTUS, he wrote, America is dead. Traitors, all of them. The court is corrupt. And then his lawyers apparently had a complete meltdown because some of those posts were veering dangerously close to contempt of court territory. He kept deleting them and then reposting them because he simply could not help himself. The fear, the desperation, the sheer terror, it was all overflowing from him in real time for the entire world to see. But here is what really matters about this moment. This is not just another legal setback that his team can spin away. This is the moment when the last institutional barrier between Trump and removal from office crumbled into dust. The courts are against him. Congress already voted to impeach him. His own Pentagon officials leaked documents exposing his lies. His own cabinet has been discussing the 25th Amendment behind his back. And now, even the conservative Supreme Court, the court he bragged about reshaping with 3 appointments, is telling him there is no legal way to stop his trial. No constitutional exception, no special treatment, nothing. The path to conviction is now completely clear. The dominoes are lined up, and all it takes now is for the Senate to vote. What makes the Supreme Court ruling even more shocking is how dismissive they were about the whole thing. They did not write a lengthy opinion full of legal nuance. They did not engage with Trump's arguments as if they deserved serious consideration. They just issued an unsigned order. That is it. Emergency relief denied. Trial proceeds via constitutional process. No substantial burden on his duties. Just a flat, cold, bureaucratic no. And that flat no came with a 5-4 split, which means even Chief Justice John Roberts voted against him. Even Amy Coney Barrett, the justice he appointed and publicly celebrated, voted against him. The 4 hardline conservatives on the court could not save him even if they wanted to, because they could not get the votes. This echoes what happened with his hush money conviction appeal. Back then, the Supreme Court also said no, also 5-4, and his conviction stood. He became a felon, but at least he got to stay in office. This time, the stakes are astronomically higher. This time, the vote is not about some criminal conviction from before he was president. This time, the vote is about whether he gets to remain president at all. And with Senate conviction, odds jumping to 78%, with at least 4 to 7 Republican senators reportedly ready to flip, with his own cabinet still discussing the 25th Amendment, this is not abstract anymore. This is happening. Let us back up and understand exactly what the Supreme Court just did and why it matters so much. Because this ruling is going to be taught in law schools for decades as the moment when presidential immunity finally hit its limits. The moment when even a conservative-dominated court said, no, you cannot use executive power as a shield against accountability for war crimes and abuse of power. Trump's legal team had filed an emergency appeal. That is what you do when you are desperate. You run to the Supreme Court and you beg them to stop everything, and their argument was basically that the impeachment articles unfairly targeted him for actions he took as president. That as president, he had the authority to make decisions about the Iran war. That as president, he had the authority to set policy. And therefore, those actions are protected by presidential immunity and cannot be used as the basis for impeachment. Think about how wild that argument actually is. It is basically saying anything a president does while acting as president is immune from impeachment. That would mean a president could literally do anything and never be removed. A president could start a war based on fabricated intelligence. A president could commit treason. A president could do whatever they wanted, and there would be nothing Congress could do about it because presidential immunity would cover everything. The Supreme Court looked at that argument and basically said, no, that is insane. The court's order was super brief, but the message was crystal clear. Emergency relief denied means they are not going to stop the trial. Constitutional process proceeds means the Senate is going to vote on whether to convict. No substantial burden on his duties means you can be president while being tried for impeachment, so there is no excuse to delay this any further. The trial is happening, and it is probably happening within days. By next week, maybe sooner. The Senate moves fast when the stakes are this high and when this many people want the trial to happen. The fact that this ruling was unsigned is really important. When the Supreme Court issues an unsigned opinion, especially on something this politically charged, it usually means they are trying to diffuse the political fallout by not putting an individual justice's name on it. But it also means the decision was not close in the way that matters. It means the majority decided they could not pretend this was some nuanced legal question. They just had to shut it down. And the fact that it was 5-4 tells you that the 4 most conservative justices tried to save Trump but could not get enough votes. Roberts and Barrett both sided with the liberal bloc. That is huge. That is the Chief Justice and the most recent Trump appointee both saying, no, presidential immunity does not cover this. You cannot start wars based on lies and then claim immunity. You have to answer for this. And that brings us back to Pam Bondi and her testimony, because Bondi's testimony essentially proved that Trump knew the intelligence was fake. She testified that Trump was told by his own officials that the Iran war justification was not credible, that the intelligence was fabricated, and he pushed forward anyway. He told them to stop raising concerns and to support the war. So now the Senate is not debating whether Trump's actions were constitutional. That case is basically over. Now the Senate is debating whether Trump's actions deserve removal from office. And when you have a sitting attorney general testifying that the president knowingly used false intelligence to start a war, the answer to that question becomes pretty obvious. Yes. Yes, he should be removed removed from office. What is really important about what the Supreme Court did here is that they basically rejected the entire presidential immunity argument in a way that will bind future presidents as well. They said, no, you cannot hide behind executive power when you are lying to start a war. You cannot claim that your actions as president are immune from impeachment when those actions involve fabricating intelligence and deceiving Congress and the American people. That is a massive precedent. That is the kind of ruling that changes the law and changes what future presidents can do. Because now every president knows that if they lie about a war, if they fabricate intelligence, if they abuse the war powers that Congress gave them, they can be impeached and removed from office. There is no immunity. There is no escape hatch. There is no constitutional shield. The conservative justices on the court apparently looked at Trump's argument and decided it was too extreme. They decided that accepting his argument would basically render Congress powerless to impeach a president for anything he did as part of his official duties. And that would be absurd. That would be un-American. That would be against everything the Constitution stands for. So they said no. And that no was joined by the Chief Justice and by Trump's own appointee, Coney Barrett. That is a huge moment. That is the moment when Trump's closest allies on the court said, we cannot support this argument. We have to rule against you. And that probably feels like a betrayal to Trump. That probably feels like a stab in the back. But that is what the rule of law looks like. That is what an independent judiciary looks like. Justices who are willing to rule against the president even when that president appointed them. The betting markets responded immediately to the Supreme Court ruling. Conviction odds jumped from 72% to 78%. That is a 6-point swing in a matter of hours. And that 6-point swing reflects what everyone in politics is thinking right now. The trial is actually happening. Conviction is actually probable. Removal is actually possible. This is not theoretical anymore. This is really happening. And that is why Trump is panicking. That is why he is posting 75 times by 3 in the morning. That is why he is attacking judges and calling the Supreme Court corrupt and saying democracy is dead. He is watching his entire world collapse in real time, and there is nothing he can do to stop it. But here is the thing that really gets me about this ruling and about what it means. This is the Supreme Court telling Trump, we cannot save you. We tried. We gave you appeals. We gave you every chance to make your case. But the evidence is too strong. The case is too clear. The war lies are documented. Your own people testified against you. There is nothing we can do. You have to go to trial. And when you go to trial, you are probably going to be convicted. And there is nothing this court can do to stop that. That is the message. That is the reality that just hit Trump in the face. And that message cascades. It does not just affect Trump. It affects the Senate. It affects Congress. It affects the public. It says, okay, the courts have ruled. The legal barriers are gone. The emergency relief is denied. So now it is up to the Senate to vote on conviction. And with 78% conviction odds and at least 4 Republican senators ready to flip and possibly more, the Senate is going to convict. They are probably going to convict. And when they convict, Trump is removed from office. The vice president becomes president. And Trump's political career, at least as a sitting office holder, is over. The protests have been intensifying nationwide. People are gathering in the streets, some supporting Trump, saying this is a coup, saying this is unconstitutional, saying democracy is dead. Others supporting the Senate trial, saying Trump needs to be held accountable, saying no one is above the law, saying this is how the system is supposed to work. It is chaos. It is exactly the kind of constitutional crisis that people have been warning about for months, and it is all coming to a head right now. This is the moment. This is when it all happens. Let us talk about what happens next, because the timeline is about to get insane. The Senate trial is starting within days, and when that trial happens, we are going to see the Senate vote on whether to convict Trump and remove him from office. That vote requires a 2/3 majority, 67 votes out of 100. Republicans hold 53 seats. Democrats hold 47 seats. So if every single Democrat votes to convict, which they will, that gets you 47 votes. You still need 20 Republicans to vote for conviction, 20 out of 53 Republican senators. That sounds like a lot. That sounds impossible. But apparently it is not. Apparently at least 4 Republican senators are ready to flip. Some people are saying maybe 6 or 7. Some are saying up to 10 could potentially flip given the right circumstances. If even just 4 flip, that gives you 51 votes. That is not enough. You need 67. If 6 flip, that is 53. Still not enough. If 10 flip, that is 57. Still not enough. You need 20 to flip to get to 67. And nobody really thinks 20 are going to flip. That would be a complete collapse of the Republican Party. But here is where the analysis gets really interesting. You do not actually need 20 senators to flip if other factors come into play. If the 25th Amendment is invoked before the Senate trial happens, then the trial might not happen at all. Trump would be removed before it even starts. Or if Trump resigns, same thing. The trial becomes moot. Or if enough senators flip to get to 67 votes, maybe it is 6 or 7 instead of 20 if the political pressure gets bad enough. And if more information comes out during the trial, maybe it is 15 instead of 20. Maybe it is 12. Nobody really knows exactly what number of Republican defections it will take, but the betting markets are saying 78% chance of conviction, which means the smart money is betting that the number will be whatever it needs to be. The thing about these calculations is that they change once the trial actually starts, once the evidence is presented in public, once the American people see Bondi testifying, once they hear from Pentagon officials, once they see the actual fabricated intelligence documents, once they realize how serious this is, how real the lies were, how many people died because of Trump's deception. The pressure on Republican senators is going to be immense. They are going to have to answer to their constituents about why they are protecting a president who lied about a war. They are going to have to explain themselves. And some of them probably do not want to have to make that explanation. Some of them probably would rather just vote to convict and move on. Some of them probably saw how the hush money trial played out and realized that Trump might actually go down this time, that this time it might actually happen. The 25th Amendment option is still apparently on the table. Trump's cabinet could theoretically move on that at any point. They could say, the president is unfit to serve. We are invoking the 25th Amendment. We are removing him now. Do not wait for the Senate trial. Do not wait for the vote. He is not capable of being president right now. The mental fitness question is being raised. His erratic behavior, his midnight postings, his attacks on the courts, his apparent mental breakdown, all of that could be cited as evidence that he is unfit to continue serving as president. And then the vice president becomes president immediately. Congress could then vote on whether to override the cabinet's decision and reinstate Trump, but that seems unlikely given how many Republicans are apparently ready to vote against him anyway. The 25th Amendment could be the fastest route to Trump's removal. It could happen before the Senate trial even starts, or it could happen as a backup plan if the Senate vote looks like it is going to be close and the cabinet decides to move first. What is really wild about all of this is that it is all cascading from the Pentagon leaks. The Pentagon exposed Trump's war lies. That triggered Bondi's testimony. That triggered the House impeachment vote. That triggered Trump's midnight meltdown. That triggered the Supreme Court emergency appeal. That triggered the Supreme Court ruling denying relief. That triggered the 78% conviction odds. That triggered the Senate trial. It is all one continuous cascade of dominoes falling. One decision leads to another decision, leads to another decision. And suddenly the entire Trump presidency is in free fall. And the Republican Party is basically watching their own party members signal that they are willing to break ranks. That is not normal. That is not how Senate business usually works. Senators usually vote with their party. They usually circle the wagons. They usually protect their own. But apparently enough Republicans looked at this situation and decided that protecting Trump was not worth the cost, that their own legacies were more important than party loyalty, that they did not want to be remembered as the people who protected a president who lied about a war and got people killed. And that is a massive shift. That is a fundamental breakdown of the normal Republican Party machinery. The betting markets are basically pricing in Trump's removal as likely. 78% conviction odds means the smart money is betting on Trump being convicted and removed from office. That is serious institutional money. That is people who analyze politics for a living and put actual capital on their predictions, saying, yes, Trump is probably getting removed. That is a pretty clear signal about what is actually going to happen. The implications of this are massive. If Trump is convicted and removed, that sends a message that says no one is above the law. That says the Constitution works even when the stakes are this high. That says Congress and the Senate can actually hold a president accountable for abuse of power and for starting wars based on lies. That is not a small thing. That is a fundamental statement about how democracy works and whether it actually functions. It has been a long time since an American president faced serious accountability for their actions. Nixon resigned before he could be convicted. No other president has ever been removed from office through conviction. So if Trump is actually convicted and removed, that will be historic. That will be unprecedented. That will be the moment when the system finally worked against a president who broke the law. But it also opens up a lot of questions. If Trump is removed, does the vice president face immediate impeachment too? Does the new president grant him a pardon? Does Trump actually face criminal charges after he leaves office? Does this heal the country? Or does it deepen the divisions? Does it set a precedent that will be used against future presidents? Does impeachment become normalized and weaponized from now on? All of these are questions that the country will have to deal with if and when Trump is actually convicted and removed from office. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely insane. The Senate trial will be unprecedented. The vote will be historic. The outcome will reshape American politics. And it all started with the Pentagon leaking documents about Trump's war lies. Everything flows from that moment. Everything leads to this moment right here, right now. The moment when the Supreme Court slammed the final door on Trump's escape routes and cleared the path for conviction and removal. This is it. This is the moment. This is when it all comes to a head. The institutions are functioning. The courts are working. Congress is acting. The Constitution is being invoked. And a president is about to face accountability for starting a war based on lies. This is what democracy looks like when it actually works. This is what it looks like when no one is above the law. And we are about to see whether America actually means what it says about checks and balances and accountability and the rule of law. Stay tuned, because the Senate trial is coming, and it is going to be the biggest political event in decades.